Welcome back to the TPS podcast. TPS stands for trillions per second, named after the book. Today we'll discuss the introduction section, starting with waking up in the flux. Ooh. Sounds like it's going to be another hardcore episode. Let's dive right in.
It certainly does. And honestly, hardcore is really the only word that fits the material we are staring down today.
Right.
We were looking at a text that effectively attempts to rewrite the operating manual for the human mind. But it's doing so using a language that actually makes sense to those of us living in the 21st century.
Exactly. The book is Trillions Per Second, a hardcore manual for hacking the simulation. And, just looking at the cover and reading the first few pages, you realize pretty quickly this is not your grandmother's book on spirituality.
Not at all. There are no lotus flowers here. No gentle streams, no, incense burning in the background.
Not a single one.
The central conceit here, and it is a fascinating one right out of the gate, is that this is not a religious text. It's not even a self-help book in the way we usually think of them, the whole chicken soup for the soul thing.
Right.
It frames itself explicitly as a system update. The author treats what we usually call spirituality as system administration.
System administration. I have to be honest, when I hear spirituality, my mind goes to finding inner peace, maybe a yoga retreat, something quiet.
Sure.
I definitely do not think of the IT guy coming to fix my printer or update my drivers. It sounds sterile.
It does sound sterile. And it sounds cold and mechanical, but that is exactly the point the author is making. The argument here is that for thousands of years, humanity has been using agricultural metaphors to describe the mind.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, we talk about planting the seeds of karma, right? Or cultivating compassion or finding the roots of our attachment.
Yeah, that's the standard language. It's all very organic, kind of comforting, actually.
Yeah. It is. It's familiar. But the author's premise is that we don't live in an agricultural society anymore. We live in a digital one. And those organic metaphors, as comforting as they are actually holding us back.
Oh, so.
They're too fuzzy. They're too soft. They lack precision. I mean, think about it. If you have a virus on your computer, you don't meditate on it or send it loving kindness.
No, you quarantine it and you delete it. You run a scan. You get rid of it.
Exactly. You run a diagnostic, you find the corrupted file, and you execute a patch. The mission, as it's stated right up front in this intro, isn't to pray or to worship. It is to debug the kernel.
Debug the kernel. Wow.
The whole premise is that what we perceive as reality is actually a procedural generation engine rendering at trillions per second. That's the title. And our biological brains are just lagging hardware.
Lagging hardware.
Yeah, we can't keep up with the data stream.
So we are essentially walking around with hyping-frame brains in a high-speed universe.
That is precisely the metaphor. And because of that lag, we suffer. We create these artifacts of solidity and selfhood that aren't actually there in the raw data.
Okay, so the tone is very cyberpunk.
Deeply cyberpunk. We are consciously moving away from those agricultural metaphors you mentioned, the seeds, roots, flowers, and moving straight into digital logic. We're talking frame rates, rendering engines, GPU load, viruses, memory leaks.
It's like the Matrix meets the Buddha, but without the leather trench coats. Well, maybe with the trench coats, metaphorically speaking.
Maybe.
It reminds me of when I finally upgraded my gaming PC monitor. I went from 60 hertz to 144 hertz, and suddenly I realized how choppy and slow my previous experience was. Even though I thought it was perfectly smooth at the time, I just didn't have a better reference point.
That is a perfect analogy. You didn't know you were lagging until you saw the upgrade. This book is trying to show you the lag in your own perception.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because before we can even get into the how-to of debugging this kernel, we really need to talk about who wrote this manual. Because the author profile is, well, it's unusual to say the least.
Unusual is putting it mildly. The author goes by the pseudonym C4 Chaos.
Tilde C4 Chaos. Yeah, that sounds like a handle you'd see on a hacker forum in the late 90s. Or maybe a gamer tag for a particularly destructive player.
Precisely. And that absolutely fits the persona. C4 Chaos describes themselves as a ghost in the machine.
A ghost in the machine.
They claim to be a digital native with deep roots in both the tech world and what they call hardcore dharma. But what's so fascinating here and so different is the absolute insistence on pseudonymity.
Right, they don't want to be known.
Not at all. In the About the Author section, they explicitly state that a personal biography is just noise. The manual itself, the information, that's the signal. Everything else is a distraction.
That is such a strong stance. I mean, usually authors want you to know their credentials, their life story, their struggles. They want to build that connection, that parasocial relationship with the reader.
Of course they do. But C4 Chaos argues that you don't need to know the messenger. You just need the code. They are actively trying to strip away the ego, the self, from the very packaging of the book itself.
Which makes sense. I mean, if the whole point of the book is to dismantle the self, why would you paste a biography and a big smiling headshot on the back cover?
Exactly. It would be a contradiction. The medium has to match the message.
It's consistent, I'll give them that. But they do claim a specific lineage, right? They aren't just making all this up in a basement somewhere.
No, and this is crucial for their credibility.
Mm-hmm.
They claim descent from the lineage of Yubakin, Mahasi Sayadaw, Shinzen Young, and Daniel Ingram. Now, for anyone who's looked into this stuff, these are heavy hitters in the world of pragmatic, no-nonsense meditation.
And we'll definitely get into those names later because the book frames them as open source contributors, which I found both hilarious and brilliant.
It's perfect.
But there's another contributor, another collaborator that I found absolutely wild. In the afterword, there's this major revelation about how this book was actually written.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting and potentially very controversial for some people. C4 Chaos reveals that the book was a centaur creation.
A centaur, like the mythical creature, half man, half horse?
Sort of. In the world of chess and high-level computing, a centaur refers to a human working in tandem with an artificial intelligence to achieve results better than either could alone.
So the author is admitting.
No, they stated proudly that the book was co-authored with large language models, with AIs.
Wow.
They described their role not just as a writer, but as a conductor for an AI symphony.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back on this a little bit. I mean, we've all seen AI writing. It writes bad poetry. It writes generic marketing emails. How can an AI write about enlightenment? An AI doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have a mind, not in the way we do. It definitely doesn't meditate.
Right.
How can it possibly explain the nature of the human mind?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the author totally anticipates that skepticism. But here's the counter-argument, and it's a fascinating one. The author used the AIs to pry open the Abhidhamma.
The Abhidhamma, that's the ancient Buddhist collection of texts on metaphysics and psychology, right? Super dense stuff.
Incredibly dense. The Abhidhamma is essentially a massive technical manual from ancient India. It breaks reality down into these tiny, discrete moments of consciousness called mind moments, or siddhas. It is incredibly dry and granular.
Yeah, I've tried to read translations. It feels like reading binary code. It's almost impossible for a modern human to read casually.
It is. It's assembly code for the mind. But guess who loves assembly code? Guess who excels at analyzing massive streams of discrete data points and finding patterns without getting bored or overwhelmed?
The AI.
The AI. The author makes this incredible argument that artificial intelligence might actually be better equipped to understand the technical side of the Abhidhamma than we are.
How?
Because the AI doesn't have a biological ego. It doesn't have feelings to get in the way. It looks at a core concept like impermanence, the idea that everything is constantly changing, and it doesn't see a deep, sad philosophy about loss.
What does he?
It sees a refresh rate. It sees a system constantly updating its state.
Whoa. So because the AI is a simulation itself, or at least operates on similar principles, it can look at these ancient texts that describe the mechanics of reality and say, oh, I know what this is. This is a rendering engine. These are the specs.
Precisely. C4 Chaos says the project started as just a simple cheat sheet for Dharma geeks. It was trying to translate those dry texts into modern terms, but it suffered from scope creep. It kept growing. It mutated into an open source project with AI alignment protocols.
The significance of that is it's huge. This is a manual written by a human AI team for humans who want to upgrade their biological hardware. It's this recursive loop of intelligence trying to understand itself.
It feels like we're living in the future, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like using a robot to explain to a human how to stop being a robot.
Or how to stop being a buggy robot and become the system admin.
Right. Okay, so we have this anonymous ghost in the machine conductor and their AI orchestra. But what sparked this whole thing? Every superhero needs an origin story. What was the radioactive spider moment for C4 Chaos?
Well, it wasn't a spider. It was a glitch, a specific, very visceral experience that happened at 3 a.m.
Of course. The witching hour.
As the author calls it, the witching hour for insomniacs and coders. So picture the scene. It's 3 a.m., dead silent. The author wakes up, but they can't move. total sleep paralysis.
Oh, man. I've had that once or twice. It is absolutely terrifying. You feel like there's a demon sitting on your chest. You try to scream and nothing comes out. Your mind is wide awake, but your body is locked.
Exactly. The author describes it as being pinned by a gravity well.
Mm-hmm.
The lizard brain, the amygdala, just starts screaming. It's the full panic routine. Aliens, monsters, intruders, dying. It's a primal, helpless fear response.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But then it gets weirder. The auditory hallucinations start. A high-pitched whine, just ee.
Like tinnitus, the ringing in your ears. I get that sometimes after a loud concert.
It's similar, but the author makes a clear distinction. Tinnitus usually feels like it's coming from the ears, on the periphery. The sound felt central, like it was coming from inside the skull, and it was ramping up like a turbine engine spinning to failure, louder and louder.
Okay, that's more intense.
And then the physical sensation kicks in. A feeling of 220 volts buzzing through the marrow of their bones. Their teeth are literally rattling in their skull.
That sounds horrific, like a seizure or something. My first thought would be, I'm having a stroke.
It does. And the biological imperative, every instinct is shouting, danger, wake up, move, get out. But here is the pivot, the crux of the whole story. Just hours before this event, C4 Chaos had been reading Daniel Ingram's book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha.
Ah, which is one of the source code texts from the lineage we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And Ingram, in his book, explicitly describes this exact state. He calls this stage the arising and passing away. He flags this experience, the intense vibrations, the high-pitched sound, the sensory overload, not as a pathology, not as a bug, but as a feature.
A feature.
Yes. A standard, predictable stage in deep insight meditation, when the brain starts to perceive reality at a much higher frame rate.
So instead of thinking I'm dying, the author has this moment of recognition and thinks, wait a minute, I read the documentation for this.
Exactly. It's the difference between a user seeing a blue screen of death and completely panicking versus a sysadmin seeing it and calmly reading the error code to diagnose the problem. Ingram's instruction for this state was simple. Don't freak out. It's a sign of progress. Lean into it.
Lean into it. Lean into the feeling of being electrocuted.
That was the instruction. So C4 Chaos decides to run an experiment right there in the middle of this terrifying experience. Instead of fighting the paralysis, they surrender to the voltage. They stop resisting. They lean into the buzz.
Surrender to the voltage. That is a great metal band name right there. But seriously, what happens when you stop fighting a sensation that intense? I can't even imagine.
The book says the moment they surrendered, the heaviness vanished instantly. The physical room dissolved into pixelated static.
Like TV snow?
It's exactly like that. And then the author's consciousness shifts into a fully lucid dream, or as they frame it, a simulation. They describe flying over a city made of neon glass. And the clarity was, in their words, 8K.
8K clarity, so better than real life.
That's the claim. Hyper-real. And in that state, the realization hits them like a thunderbolt. I am awake inside the simulation. Gravity wasn't a fundamental law of physics anymore. It was just a toggle setting in the environment's preferences, and they just switched it off.
That is such a wild shift in perspective, from abject terror to God mode in the span of a few seconds.
And the aftermath is just as important. When they finally woke up for real for the second time, the world was different. Coffee tasted more intense. Sunlight seemed sharper, more defined. The insight that stuck with them was that the ancient masters, the Buddha, the yogis, they weren't writing poetry or fuzzy metaphors.
They were writing code.
They were writing technical manuals. They were describing these exact states, these glitches, these features. But the legacy documentation, the Pali, the Sanskrit, was outdated. The language was archaic. It needed a refactor for the modern digital native. And that refactor became this book.
Which leads us perfectly into the system dependencies. Because if you're going to run this refactor, if you're going to attempt to hack your own mind like that, you can't just go in blindly. You need the right setup, the right foundation.
Absolutely correct. The book calls this section the stack, as in a technology stack. The idea is that you cannot install a high-performance operating system on crashing, unstable hardware. You need to verify your system requirements first.
And these requirements are based on the traditional Buddhist three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha.
Yes, but they are reframed, which is critical.
Yeah, because let's be honest, the old language sounds a bit religious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I take refuge in the Buddha. It sounds like worship. It sounds like I need to shave my head and buy some orange robes.
Precisely. And C4 Chaos says, look, we aren't doing magic here. We are doing system maintenance. So they rename and reframe these 3 dependencies to fit the simulation model. They want to strip away all the religious and cultural baggage to get to the core utility.
Let's run through them. Dependency 1 is called the prime user. This is the legacy name for the Buddha.
Right. And the system role here is defined as the original sysadmin. The book is very, very clear on this point. We do not worship the prime user. We respect the expertise.
I really like that distinction. It's not about bowing down to a deity or a god king.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging that this guy, this human being, Siddhartha Gautama, was the first power user in recorded history to successfully debug the code of consciousness. He was the first one to identify the fundamental glitch, which the book identifies as the self. He isolated it, and he achieved root access.
So he proved it could be done.
He proved that the upgrade is compatible with human hardware. He's like the Linus Torvalds of the mind who created the first Linux kernel. Or maybe Alan Turing breaking the Enigma code.
Yeah, I get that. You look at his code because it compiles and it works, not because you're afraid of him or you think he's a god.
Exactly. His results are verifiable. That's why he matters.
Okay, that makes sense. Dependency 2, the master protocol. This is a reframe for the Dharma.
And this is simply the source code. The prime user didn't just achieve root access and then leave behind a bunch of cryptic riddles or mystical poems. He left documentation. He left an instruction set.
So the Dharma is the manual.
The master protocol is an open source library containing the specific replicable steps to patch your OS.
So this book, Trillions Per Second, isn't inventing new rules or a new system. It's just translating the existing library into a modern programming language.
That's the perfect way to put it. C4 Chaos insists they aren't rewriting the fundamental rules, they're updating the user interface. The core logic remains the same, but instead of obscure Pali terms, we get clear executable instructions. It's like taking a technical manual written in Latin and translating it into Python. The underlying principles are the same, but now you can actually use it.
Okay. And finally, dependency 3, the P2P Network. The legacy name for this is the Sangha, which is the community.
Yes, but it's framed here as the sandbox environment, or, my favorite, tech support.
Tech support. I like that. But why do you need a network? Can't you just hack your mind solo? If I have the manual, the source code, why do I need other people?
You can try. The book says you can absolutely try, but it's dangerous. As we saw with the sleep paralysis origin story, this stuff can get incredibly intense. Solo hacking carries significant risks of destabilizing your daily life, your production environment, if you will.
Right. You don't want to accidentally delete a critical system file in your own brain and then crash your career or your marriage because you're stuck in some weird debug loop or having a meltdown in the grocery store aisle.
Exactly that. You need a network of other users who are running the same software who can help you troubleshoot the inevitable bugs. If you hit a glitch, if you suddenly feel like you're dissolving into pixels, you need someone who can say, oh yeah, that's the arising and passing away stage. Don't worry, it's a feature, not a virus. Here's what to expect next.
It's like a beta testing community.
It is. That peer-to-peer support prevents isolation and psychosis, and it keeps your core system stable while you're attempting this major reboot.
That makes total sense. It's like having a good community on GitHub. You need other people to help merge the pull requests and spot the bugs in your code that you're blind to.
And speaking of GitHub contributors, that leads us right into the next section, the lineage acknowledgement.
Yes! This section is great. It's so clever. It frames the entire historical lineage not as a list of holy men to be revered, but as open source contributors or a dev team.
It's a fantastic reframe because it emphasizes that the code wasn't written in a vacuum. This is an open source project that has been maintained and improved by thousands of developers over centuries. And C4 Chaos assigns them these fantastic nicknames that perfectly describe their specific contributions to the code base. It really helps you understand why these specific historical figures matter.
Okay, let's go through the dev team. First up, we have Buddhaghosa. The book calls him the lead archivist.
Right. Buddhaghosa lived way back in the 5th century in Sri Lanka. His major contribution was a massive text called the Visuddhimagga, which means the path of purification. EC4 Chaos compares this text to the Linux kernel archives.
Why Linux specifically? What's the analogy there?
Because it's unbelievably dense, highly technical, and the architecture is considered basically flawless. It is not light reading, it's not inspirational, it's a systematic map of the entire path, covering every possible state of mind, every detour, every edge case. If something weird happens in your meditation, I guarantee you Buddhaghosa wrote a paragraph about it 1,500 years ago.
So he's the guy who basically backed up the entire system and kept the servers running during the Dark Ages. He preserved the system map when it could have easily been lost or corrupted.
That's it, exactly. He was the master librarian.
Okay, then we jump way forward to the 20th century with Yuba Khinfin. He's called the clock speed optimizer.
And this is a crucial feature for the modern listener, for you. Yuba Khin was a layperson. He was a high-ranking civil servant, the accountant general of Burma. He had a stressful job, a family, tax returns to file.
He was one of us.
He was one of us. And he realized that modern people couldn't just drop everything and spend 20 years in a cave. It's not practical. So he refactored the code, the practice for lay users. He made it faster, more efficient.
He optimized it. He increased the clock speed.
He emphasized the clock speed of the flux, the practice of scanning the body for sensations very, very rapidly. He proved that you don't need to be a monk to run the update. You can achieve deep states of insight while having a full-time job. He showed that high-speed processing was possible for the average user with limited time.
Which is a huge relief for anyone listening to this, I'm sure. Next on the list is Mahasi Sayadaw. The book calls him the map maker.
If Buddhaghosa was the archivist who saved the map, Mahasi Sayadaw was the one who drew a clear, easy-to-read version of it for the modern traveler. He provided the definitive diagnostic manual. He broke the path of insight down into what are called the 16 stages of insight, or the noises.
We mentioned the arising and passing away stage earlier. That's one of his stages, right?
Correct. That's the fourth stage. Before him, people just kind of meditated and hoped for the best. It was all very vague. He came along and gave us the map, so now we know exactly where we are in the process. It's like a progress bar in a software installation. You are here, 25% complete. Next step is this.
That's incredibly useful.
It's a game changer. He also developed and popularized the noting technique, which is the primary logging tool used in this book. It's a way of labeling data events in your mind as they happen, thinking, hearing, feeling pressure, seeing.
It sounds so simple, but I imagine it's incredibly powerful for cutting through the noise.
It is. It's the core debugging tool.
Okay, then we have SN Gonka. He's labeled the hardware scanner.
If you've heard of Vipassana meditation retreats today, you have almost certainly heard of Goenka. He took the system developed by Yuba Khin and he scaled it for global enterprise deployment.
Enterprise deployment, that is a great way to put it. He turned it into a franchise, in a way.
In the best sense. He standardized the teaching. He used audio and video recordings to teach the exact same 10-day course to thousands of people at once, all over the world. He taught the body scan, the technique of systematically scanning the hardware of your body for lag and resistance.
Which he called Vedana, or sensation.
Yes. He taught millions of people to patiently scan their own hardware for the bioelectric flux of sensation. He made the initial software patch accessible to a mass market.
Now we get to the more recent and maybe more controversial figures. Daniel Ingram, the whistleblower.
Ingram is pivotal for this specific hardcore approach. He wrote the book that inspired C4 Chaos's origin story. The manual calls him a whistleblower because he basically leaked the dev notes that were protected by unspoken NDAs.
NDAs. Non-disclosure agreements. Who is signing NDAs in Buddhism? That sounds crazy.
It's metaphorical, but it was socially very real. For centuries, in many traditional Buddhist circles, talking about high-level attainments like actually becoming enlightened, achieving the goal, was completely taboo. It was seen as arrogant or just impossible for anyone who wasn't a great master of the past. Monks just wouldn't tell lay people if they had achieved these states.
So it was a secret club with a code of silence.
You could say that. And Ingram came out with his book and said, no, this is a technical process with predictable results. Here are the instructions. Here's exactly what it looks like. I did it, and you can too. Let's be transparent, pragmatic about this.
He shattered the taboo.
He demystified the endgame. He proved that God mode is technically accessible to modern people.
God mode, or Arhat ship, yes. He took the mystery out and put the engineering metrics in.
And that brings us to the final member of the dev team, Shinzen Young, labeled the Science Liaison. Shinzen is the bridge between this ancient practice and the modern scientific community. He's a master translator. He developed a system called algorithmic mindfulness. He works tirelessly to translate the often mystical or poetic language of these traditions into the precise language of math, information theory, and neuroscience.
He created a periodic table of sense experience. What on earth does that mean?
It means he broke down the mess of human experience into its fundamental components. Instead of just a vague blob of feeling, Shinzen gives you a classification system. Is the sensory event visual, auditory, or somatic, physical? And is it happening in your internal space, thought, memory, emotion, or your external space, what you see with your eyes, hear with your ears?
So it's like a grid.
A grid. It allows you to sort the chaos of your mind into neat, manageable data types. It turns mindfulness into a data science problem. C4 Chaos relies heavily on his precise algorithmic definitions throughout the manual.
So that's the team. We have the archivist, the optimizer, the map maker, the scanner, the whistleblower, and the liaison. That is one solid lineup of developers.
It is, and it establishes crucial credibility. This isn't just some guy in a basement making things up. This is the culmination of centuries of dedicated research and development just with a brand new user interface.
So, okay, we have the dev team, we have the system dependencies installed. Now we need to look at the code itself, the kernel specs. This is the core thesis of the book, right?
This is the absolute core. This is where we get into the fundamental physics of the simulation. The prime user, the Buddha, discovered 4 immutable laws of how this system operates. In the legacy files, they're known as the 4 Noble Truths. Here, in this manual, they are the kernel specs. These aren't beliefs. They're the rules of the engine.
Okay, let's break them down. Axiom 1. The glitch, its legacy name is dukkha, or suffering. The system status is listed as buffering.
Right. And this completely redefines suffering. It's no longer just life is sad or bad things happen. In this model, suffering is system latency.
Explain that. How is all of human suffering just latency? That feels a bit, I don't know, dismissive of real things like grief or chronic physical pain.
It's not dismissing the event itself. It's explaining the mechanics of the discomfort we feel in response to the event. The theory is that reality is a constant stream of raw data, the flux rendering at trillions of times per second. It's pure chaotic change. But our biological brain, it's slow. It's a lagging processor. It radically undersamples the signal.
So we are missing most of the frame.
We are missing almost all of them. So to make sense of this overwhelming high-speed chaos, the brain does something clever but problematic. It buffers the data. It takes snapshots and stitches the stream together to create the illusion of stable, solid objects that persist through time.
Like the spinning car wheel in a movie that looks like it's moving backward. Or not moving at all.
That is the classic example. Or think of a propeller on an airplane. When it's still, you see distinct blades. But when it spins fast enough, it looks like a solid, transparent disc. You feel like you could reach out and touch the disc. But the disc doesn't actually exist. It's a perceptual artifact created by the high speed of the blades and the low sampling rate of your eyes.
So the book is saying solidity itself is an aliasing artifact. The chair I'm sitting on isn't solid. It's just refreshing really, really fast.
Precisely. And we suffer because we try to grab onto and hold onto these buffered static images, the disk, in a universe that is actually fluid and constantly changing the spinning blades. The friction between our desire for static buffering and the fluid reality is the experience of suffering. We want things to stay still, but the engine is constantly rendering movement.
That makes the concept of letting go sound much more technical. You aren't letting go of something emotionally. You're just telling your brain to stop its buffering process.
Exactly. You're trying to sync your perception with the actual refresh rate of reality. Which brings us to Axiom 2, the resource hog, legacy name. Sumadaya, the origin of suffering, the virus.
And the virus is the self.
Correct. According to this manual, the self is not the user. It is not you. It is a background process that is consuming 99% of your CPU.
Okay, I have to stop you there. I mean, that hurts my feelings a little bit. Myself is just a resource hog. My personality, my memories, my opinions, my terrible jokes, that's all just malware.
It feels deeply personal, doesn't it? That's the defense mechanism of the virus. It convinces the system that it is the system. But according to this manual, yes, the diagnostic for this process is that it's an infinite loop. The self is a script that is constantly trying to pause the live feed of reality, to hold on to pleasant data or push away unpleasant data.
But the feed can't be paused. Time keeps moving. The data keeps streaming.
No, it can't. So what happens? The system overheats. It causes a massive memory leak. You are trying to run a static file structure, your identity, your history, your grudges, your desires, on a dynamic streaming environment. It's fundamentally incompatible. It's destined to crash. You spend all your cognitive energy maintaining the idea of the whole rather than just directly experiencing this conversation.
So if I manage to delete this virus, this self process, what's left? Am I just an empty shell?
That's the big question. And that leads to Axiom 3, zero lag. Legacy name, Nirodha, the cessation of suffering. System status, optimization.
This is the promise.
This is the promise. The promise is that you can optimize the code. You don't delete the simulation. You're still in the world. You still pay your taxes. You still eat breakfast. But you delete the malware. You delete the constant resistance, the buffering, the self-referential looping.
So you achieve high bandwidth flow.
Exactly. You are allowing the data of reality to stream through your consciousness with zero latency. When you stop the buffering process, you stop the suffering that it causes. You experience the flux directly without the self-process constantly trying to edit, judge, and narrate it.
So you become more of a conduit for experience rather than a container trying to hold on to it.
That is a beautiful way to put it, yes.
And finally, that brings us to Axiom 4, the master protocol. Legacy name, MAGA, the path.
This is how you get to root access.
Hmm.
The system status is installing update. And this is the practical part. The axiom states that you can't just wish the malware away. You can't just understand this intellectually and have it magically disappear. You need an uninstall wizard.
You have to actually run the code. You have to do the work.
Yes. The specific exercises in the book, the noting, the body scanning, all based on that open source lineage we discussed, act as the patch. They are the executable files that you run to perform this removal. It all boils down to training your attention to match the actual speed of the simulation.
It's such a cohesive and internally consistent model. It really does strip away all the magic and replaces it with pure mechanics. It makes the grand project of enlightenment sound like an engineering problem.
And that is absolutely the goal, to demystify it and give you the controller, to move you from being a confused user to being a competent admin.
Okay, before we wrap up, we have to talk about the structure of the book itself, the metastructure, because apparently the book isn't just a list of chapters, it's designed as a fractal.
It is. This is a brilliant little piece of architectural design. The book itself is built as a recursive fractal of the 4 kernel specs we just discussed.
So the table of contents actually mirrors the axioms. It's not just random.
Not random at all. It's deliberate. Phase 1 of the book is called the Diagnostic. This entire section corresponds to axioms 1 and 2, analyzing the problem. It's about identifying the glitch, finding the resource hog. It's the part where you open the hood, trace the wires, and are forced to admit that you have a virus.
The scary part where you have to look at your own suffering head on.
The necessary part. Then phase 2 is called the code. This corresponds directly to axiom 4, the method. This section contains the actual logging tools and hacks you do on the cushion, the specific practical exercises.
And phase 3, what does that correspond to?
Phase 3 is the patch. This corresponds to axiom 3, the result, the experience of achieving zero lag. The book is designed to guide the user from the blue screen of death of their own anxiety all the way to root access by mimicking the debugging process in its very layout.
So it's designed to walk you through the upgrade process as you read it. It's not just a book, it's an installation wizard in book form.
It is. The structure is part of the teaching. It enforces the learning. The book's architecture makes it clear you can't just skip to the patch without first running the diagnostic.
So to recap, we've met the anonymous ghost author and their AI orchestra. We've survived the sleep paralysis Flux. We've installed the 3 dependencies of the stack. We've honored the open source dev team, and we've reviewed the 4 kernel specs. That's a lot.
It is a lot, but when you boil it down, it's also very simple. It's just input processing output. It's just information theory applied to the mind.
So let's bring it home. What does this all mean? Why should our listener really care about any of this? Why not just stay a user and muddle through?
Because the default user experience is inherently buggy. It crashes, it lags, it leads to burnout and anxiety. If you start to look at your stress, your anxiety, your depression, not as personal failures or moral failings, but as system lag and memory leaks, it completely changes how you approach solving them.
It becomes a technical problem, not a personal one.
Yes. It's not about just feeling good in a temporary way. It's about achieving long-term system stability. It's about performance. It's about recognizing that you have the authority to access the kernel of your own mind. You don't have to live with the factory-installed glitches forever.
There's one last piece that really got me thinking. The stuff in the afterword about AI alignment implies something huge about compassion. We usually think of compassion as, a warm, fuzzy feeling, being nice.
Right. A virtue.
A virtue. But the manual suggests that compassion isn't just a nice sentiment. It's the Nash equilibrium for a complex network.
A Nash equilibrium. Yeah, that's pulling from game theory. That's pure math.
It is. And the idea is that in a deeply interconnected system like human society, or even just your own mind, if you want to optimize your own compute efficiency, you must minimize the latency and friction of the other nodes you're connected to.
Because if another node is lagging, it drags down the performance of the whole network.
Exactly. So if you are connected to everything, as these traditions claim, then actively hurting others or even just ignoring their suffering literally hurts your own bandwidth. It creates friction and lag in the total system.
So compassion becomes a logical necessity for a stable system. It's not be nice because a holy book says so. It's be nice because it's the most computationally efficient way to run the network.
That is mind-blowing. It completely secularizes and rationalizes morality.
It does. And that brings us to the final provocative thought to leave you with. If this model holds any water, if yourself, your ego, really is just a resource-hogging script, a piece of buggy looping malware,
Yeah.
what happens when you finally hit end task?
Yeah.
What is left running on the system when the self-process finally terminates?
Oh,
I guess we'll have to run the patch to find out.
indeed.
Log into the real. Embrace the flux. See you in the next deep dive.